plenty of critics, but this week he found a few from his own side. Former Health Secretary, for instance, Alan Milburn, attacked his policy on the NHS, and Gordon Brown's former spin doctor, Damien McBride, said today he should show some more backbone. Well, every one of those attacks makes an election victory look a little less certain. But could my next guest be the man who does help Mr Miliband into number 10? Alex Sammond is the former Scottish First Minister, of course, and he's hoping to be elected as a Westminster MP in May. He joins me now from Stricken in Aberdeenshire. And a very good morning to you, Mr Sammond. So, Mr Sammond, are you counting on there being a hung parliament? How certain do you think that is?
Well, nothing's certain in life or politics, damn it, but a balanced parliament looks pretty likely at the present moment. That looks like the most likely outcome. I'm hardly surprised because, I mean, who'd want to give either David Cameron or Ed Miliband a majority? I don't think either of them is worth that. So a balanced parliament looks like the favourite at the present moment, but nothing is certain.
No, indeed. So how would an enlarged SNP representation in Westminster, with you amongst them, how would you exploit those opportunities?
Well, our job would be to progress Scottish interests, and that in particular means to enforce the delivery of the vow, the promise that was made to Scotland of home rule, near federalism, Devo to the max. In these last desperate days of the referendum campaign, where the Free Westminster leaders were in a state of panic, these promises will have to be redeemed. But there's also an area where the SNP, in conjunction with allies and Plaid Cymru in Wales and the Green Party in England, will want to see more progressive politics introduced across these islands. For example, instead of another bout of austerity from Labour or Conservative, the cancellation of the renewal of the Trident missile system and diverting that funding, 30 billion over the next 10 years, into health and education and to something useful and productive. And I think that will have a lot of support in England as well as in Scotland.
Just let me digress for a minute then, Mr Sammond, because of what you said there about the anti-austerity feeling. Did you look over at Greece and see the Syriza victory there as saying, you know, there is another way, there is an appetite amongst electorates in Europe for those parties that say no to austerity? Would you push, for instance, Labour more in that direction if you did get involved with them in forming a government?
Well, I mean, Scotland and England aren't Greece, but certainly it's true that there are a rising tide of questioning of austerity economics. That'll take in different ways in different countries, but I think in both Scotland, England, Wales, across these islands, there are many people who say there has to be a better way than another £30,000 million of austerity cuts as laid out by George Osborne and agreed to by Ed Balls. There has to be a better way of stimulating the economy and ensuring fairness across society.
So how close would you get to Labour? Would you become Deputy Prime Minister if it was offered?
Well, Nicola Sturgeon's laid this out very clearly. I mean, what we've ruled out is any deal with the Conservative Party, formal or informal. And the reason for that, of course, is they can't be trusted. I mean, you know, it's David Cameron waltzing out of Downing Street the day after the referendum and trying to rewrite the rule book, so they can't be trusted. I think Nicola has said that a formal coalition is unlikely. We're not ruling it out, but it would be unlikely. And I think my experience of minority governments, which is pretty substantial, incidentally, in the Scottish Parliament, I led one for 4 years, would tell you that the best way to effect change is to negotiate on a vote-by-vote basis. And the things we'd negotiate in is delivery of the vow to Scotland, the cancellation of the renewal of the Trident system, and support for progressive politics, for progressive causes, things like the living wage across these islands.
Would another referendum also be part of those negotiations?
No, I think we've established what the gold standard is for holding a Scottish referendum. What has to happen is that the people of Scotland have to vote for parties putting that forward in the Scottish Parliament, a Scottish Parliament election, and a manifesto commitment delivered by a majority of MSPs. That's the route by which Scotland can have another referendum, and the timing of that, of course, is very much a matter for my successor, Nicola Sturgeon.
But that next Scottish election is the year after the general election. It could happen within the demand for another referendum, depending on how the SNP vote goes. The demand could happen within the next Parliament. Well, I mean, that's a matter for Nicola Sturgeon. You invite her onto your programme next week, and
and ask her that question. But I mean, the one thing you can be absolutely certain of, there can only be another referendum at any time in Scotland if the people of Scotland vote for it in a Scottish election. So it's the people of Scotland, actually, not any politician, who'll decide when and if there's another independence referendum.
But I mean, there is a vote coming up in which the people of Scotland will vote, a general election. The SNP, if we look at the polls now, and you hope that that is so, the SNP would, in Scottish terms, on current polling, win that election in Scotland.
Yeah, we're taking nothing for granted. We're working really hard, even in conditions like this, Dermot. I'll be out canvassing later on this afternoon, hopefully, here in the northeast of Scotland. So we're working really hard and taking nothing for granted. But we've set out what we're attempting to do to further Scottish interests in this election, and that is to enforce the vow, the promises that were made to Scotland, to make sure they're delivered, and to put forward progressive politics across these islands. That's proving very attractive to many, many people in Scotland. I think actually it would prove attractive to a lot of people south of the border as well.
OK, would Trident be a deal breaker if in those negotiations about cooperation coalition, perhaps, if Trident were not to be removed from Scottish soil and waters, would that be a deal breaker?
No, can I just correct you? The decision that will be made in the next Westminster Parliament, Dermot, is whether it's the gateway decision for the renewal of Trident. In other words, whether to spend £100 billion over the next generation, or about £30 billion over the next 10 years in renewing, replacing the Trident missile system. That's the vote that's coming up in the next House of Commons, and we say we should not do that, particularly at a time when the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, are suggesting another £30,000 million of austerity cuts in health and education and things that really matter. Now that's the vital vote, and that's a huge priority for the SNP, and indeed for other parties and for other MPs to stop that happening. You know, at a time of austerity, you don't waste £30 billion on a new generation of nuclear missiles.
So if you were working with Mr Miliband, I know you'd keep it businesslike, but you did deride him, didn't you, in the course of the Scottish independence referendum campaign. You referred to him, didn't you, as one of the Three Amigos, part of Team Westminster, and he hit back and said that the SNP are running the same race to the bottom that the Tories have embarked upon. It got pretty bitter.
Well, I mean, there were Three Amigos, weren't there? There were David Cameron, Ed Miliband campaigning side by side, shoulder to shoulder, Tory and Labour together, and Nick Clegg as well. These were the Three Amigos. And it's also true, of course, that Ed Miliband has achieved what no Labour leader has ever achieved in the history of Scottish politics. That's he's even more unpopular than David Cameron. That is a remarkable achievement. But listen, we judge people on the policies they put forward. And what we're trying to do is to get things that benefit the Scottish people and that put forward the case for progressive politics across these islands. So it's on the policies that this thing will be judged, and as Sky Television says, on the margins that this elections will be won.
OK, and what did you make of that? I mean, on the other side of the coin, that Conservative poster that mocked up a picture of you and Ed Miliband outside Number 10. It's thought that they photoshopped your head perhaps onto Ed Balls' body. But the point being, they're saying that you would want to, your tactics would be to infuriate the English so much that they would want independence for Scotland as well.
Yeah, I was pretty annoyed about the photoshopping on Ed Balls' body. I mean, that was certainly below the belt. You know, I think even the Daily Mail described that poster as a Tory own goal, because just that David Cameron's only claim to fame is he's marginally less unpopular in Scotland than Ed Miliband, then perhaps I'm less unpopular in England than David Cameron.
And what about the other issue they're making up? But as I say, about the issue of Scotland getting a lot and England not getting very much indeed. And Jim Murphy made that point, didn't he, about a mansion tax, which you support, presumably, that mansion tax raised mainly in the southeast, raised mainly in London, that could pay for a lot more Scottish nurses.
Yeah, we're going to have to dig me out here, I think, Dermot, by the time this interview is over. But I thought Jim Murphy was particularly foolish in the way he expressed that, incidentally. Jim Murphy is trying desperately to, put a tartan scarf on, because we've known him all his time in politics as a Blairite cheerleader for the Iraq War. Now he's trying to pretend he's something else. It's not cutting much ice in Scotland, incidentally, and I suspect he's not courting any popularity in England either.
Ice is the right word to use, I guess, judging by the conditions there, Mr. Sammond. We will let you go. We hope you don't need to be dug up, but every time I talk to you, it seems to be lovely, picturesque weather.
I'm going back to watch the tennis, damn it, where I understand it's somewhat warmer in Australia.
Yeah, and let's hope Andy Murray turns it around. We hear he lost the first set. I'll let you get back inside. Alex Sammond, thank you very much
indeed. Just like
indeed.
the referendum there. Damn it, 5-5, thank you.
OK. Thank you very much. Mr. Sammond there in the snow or the sleet there in Stricken. Now, coming up on Monaghan, I'll take a look through the Sunday papers with David Mellor. We've got Lord Levy joining him and Stonewall Chief Executive Ruth Hunt. That's coming up next.